Okay, we're going to discuss the state of Forcados oil gas pipeline, but just a few minutes, just about 1 minute there to look at the big oil seven, the big seven oil companies on our market, the traders, we call them the oil and gas retailers. So let's take a quick look at how these stocks finished off on Tuesday. 0.27 gain on that in that space. Let's go through this. Corn oil, a shift of 4.06%. Forty oil was the major push for that space, followed by Owando and Seplat. A comeback for 40 oil, 2.17%, 1.53 million ordinary shares, around 48.02 the closing bell. Mobile was in the red, a negative 9.975%. MIS sitting on change in grey, 39.03. Owando added 2.41% to the north, one of the green shoot, and the third green shoot on Tuesday, Seplat, 367.5. On the counter, up 5%. That's quite 1.520 million ordinary shares. Total on change at 270. So the index return, you can see that the year-to-date, about 7.5%. That's just about that, a quick recap for you, but the bigger conversation is with Dr. Ladi Bada, who is the CEO at Shoreline Natural Resources and is joining us now to chat to the return of Forcados oil terminal damaged by militants in February 2016. Good morning, Dr. Bada. We thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
Yes, good news that Forcados facility is back, but before we get into that latest news, take us through how important was Forcados terminal to Nigeria's daily oil export, and what actually happened in February last year?
Well, the Forcados terminal, it's extremely important for Nigeria's total production. It's important for Nigeria's production and also important for indigenous production. I'll give you the reason why. The Forcados terminal itself transmits about 300,000 to 350,000 barrels of crude for Nigeria, which in today's equivalent, where we are in terms of production, is almost 15-20% of Nigeria's production. So when that line went down February last year, it knocked out almost 15-20% of the Nigerian production. But more importantly, which is what really affects us as Nigerians, is that the Forcados line and the injectors within that Forcados line, which is about 7-8 individual companies, are largely indigenous companies. So it has a huge effect on the indigenous production space.
It has a very huge impact. This is what happened, really, in February last year.
Well, it started with us getting news on February 14 that the 48-inch export line, which is a line that comes from the Forcados terminal, that goes out to what we call the single buoy mooring, which is just offshore, was blown up by militants. In fact, was a really, really sad news for us because we know how difficult that line is. That line is actually an undersea line, 14-inch line, buried under the sea, and yet they were able to get to it. We always jokingly refer to it as the St. Valentine's Day massacre because it happened on 14th of February in 2014, but definitely was not a lovely news for any single one of us. And so it's as a result of an agitation, which, to be quite honest, has very little to do with the oil companies involved, but an agitation that I believe government is working actively to resolve now.
What's your involvement of Shoreline Natural Resources with Forcados facility?
The Forcados facility itself, the Forcados is divided into two separate facilities. There's the Forcados terminal itself, which is a huge terminal that's still owned and operated by Shell. But more importantly, there's a pipeline, probably the largest pipeline in the Western Delta, which is called the Forcados pipeline. And that pipeline is a huge pipeline that is about 87 kilometers long, that traverses most of the Western Delta and carries crude, the 350,000 barrels I spoke about. Now that pipeline is owned by Shoreline Natural Resources and NNPC. And we also own and manage that pipeline together with them. So we are integrally involved with managing that pipeline and, of course, the attendant issues that we have, bunkering, attacks, and everything that takes place on that pipeline.
When this facility was damaged in February last year, how did you get on the ground to begin to talk about the repairs? And, of course, there were a number of deadlines set. It was May, it was June, later it was September. The acting president the Vice President, Professor Shibaja, was there, and he talked about on the ground and said, look, this will come back on October. It didn't happen.
It's been a collaborative effort in the way it has gone. Unfortunately, it's gone on much, much longer than it should have. Most of the companies involved, as I said, 7, 8 companies, most of them are indigenous companies, are even shocked that they're even still alive now. Now, what had happened was that when the line, our own involvement is that what we own is the Forcados line itself. Now, the line itself, the 48-inch line that emanates from the Forcados terminal actually belongs to Shell and the NNPC. And so they are to be the ones responsible for the repair of that line. And but they needed a bit of encouragement, because what had happened was that when this originally happened in February, it took almost 8-9 months and quite a lot of money to fix. And the line was fixed and brought back on stream again in October last year. Within a month, you would have seen quite a few notices in the newspaper back then that the militants said they were still not happy with the government, except government were able to meet demands and all sorts of other points that they wanted resolved. And it was actually blown up again after just 1 month of operation. And so unfortunately, since that time, since February, we've been on a force majeure on the Trans-Forcados pipeline.
About how much was involved in the repair of Forcados?
I can't tell you for sure. As I said, the main parties who own that particular pipeline, even though we feed into that pipeline, is the Shell, SPDC, JV, and NNPC.
What's the industry source?
The industry value is that each time that kind of line gets damaged, we're looking at close to $100 million worth of repair, and it's not small amount of money. And that money somehow has to be dissipated through the nation, because never forget, this SPDC JV is 55% owned by NNPC, 55% owned by the Nigerian people. So once it's destroyed, the Nigerian people are also going to lose out of that 55 million. But I always say to people, even though $55 million is a lot of money, just as an example of, let's say it's $100 million, that is not the actual loss. The actual loss is close to $2 billion, which is really the loss of income that comes from the loss revenue from the production that's coming out of it. All you need to do is calculate roughly 300,000 barrels times 18 months, and then you can see the kind of losses we're talking about for the nation.
There are a number of indigenous firms like yours involved in the entire